the satanic agenda that I think is at play, especially in the Western world. When I look around me and I look at some of the ills and the evils and the cultural sort of degeneracy that we're seeing around us, I tend to think that there's an overt satanic agenda. And I'm wondering if you think that it's overt and intentional, especially when we see things like pride parades, because pride is obviously one of the 7 deadly sins. Do you think that these things are intentional, or is it a coincidence?
It depends what you mean. So I think they are intentional in that it is satanic, literally, in the enemy wanting to create chaos and disorder, where God wants order and goodness. The enemy wants the opposite of that. But if you're asking, is it intentional in the people doing it on the ground level, then I think no. I think there's a lot of ignorance, there's a lot of deception, manipulation, propaganda. I think most people on the ground level, like people who go to pride events and people who go to Antifa or anti-racist or whatever protest they're going to, these people want to be seen as nice people. They don't necessarily dial into the satanic disorder that's going on. But if you look from the top rather than grassroots, then perhaps there is intention there. We've got people like, just to take one example, George Soros, right? We've got people who are multi-billionaires wanting to shape the world in their image, essentially wanting to make gods of themselves, but manipulating the culture and really doing dirty, kind of backhanded stuff. When you look at many of these protests, it doesn't matter which protest you go to these days, especially in London, you'll see a counter protest or you'll see a group of people that have clearly been bussed in with really professional placards, and they're all the same people, the same crowd. So you can go to a Palestine event, you can go to an Israel event, you can go to a Black Lives Matter event, you can go to a anti-drag queen storytime hour event. Doesn't matter which protest or rally you go to, you'll see the same people bust in with they're pretty much paid to go, and they've got all the professional placards and stuff. And this is part of the demonic campaign of undermining our culture, undermining our society. There's a subversion going on. So that end is intentional, but I don't think the people going necessarily think along the same lines that we do.
I think so as well. If you look at the people who are actually there, they think that they're being progressive and helping out whatever minority group it's talking about. But it's specifically with the pride. Sometimes I look at that and I'm like, are they rubbing it in our face? Are they using those terms intentionally?
Yeah.
Do you think it is that they're using those terms intentionally when we look at from the top level? It's almost like laughing at us?
Again, I think this is what the enemy does, right? So the enemy takes truth and twists it. The enemy doesn't create anything. He cannot create. Only God can create. The enemy can manipulate. So take anything. So pride, for example, is a good one because it's one of the 7 deadly sins, and it's one of the major sins. It's how, the story goes that this is how Lucifer became Satan, right? The fall from heaven was due to pride. And it's one of the sins that we can never actually truly escape, because the moment the opposite of pride is humility. So we're all supposed to humble ourselves, but the moment you think you're humble, that's pride, right? So it's inescapable sin almost. And so it's one that the enemy uses quite a lot. But yes, so to take a sin like that and to celebrate it and try and paint it as a good thing, when a sin cannot be good, a sin is the opposite of good, then that is the enemy really and truly shoving it in people's faces, in God's face, in Christians' faces. But the people on the ground are saying, well, love is love, and we're here to celebrate diversity and all these buzzwords. But if you look at what's going on in these events, it's degeneracy, debauchery, indecency, it's sexual gratification. It's not just the celebration of the sin of pride, but also the sin of lust, gluttony, and all these things. And it's a kind of a capture of hell on earth. But people are told it's nice or told it's good, and so they celebrate it. And actually, we're convinced quite often that things that are not good, we're convinced that they are good. Walking around London, there's so much beauty. It's one of the most beautiful cities on earth. But then you get to the centre, you get to somewhere like Canary Wharf or somewhere that actually does have sky rises. And I think the human instinct is to think, wow, that's garish compared to all this beauty around us. But then we're told so often, this is nice, this is nice, this is nice, that you look at it, you go, oh yeah, isn't that nice? Look at these great big, it's like, it's not nice. Somehow we're convinced. And that's the same with pride. That's the same with a lot of these things. Look at the biggest killer of people in the West right now. Something that we should all be aware of, something we should all be fighting against if we believe in the sanctity of human life and protecting the vulnerable. Abortion. Yeah. What does the enemy tell us? It's not killing, it's not murder, it's not abortion, it's healthcare. Even worse, it's reproductive healthcare. Again, twisting these words into it's nothing to do with reproduction. In fact, it halts reproduction. It's not healthy. It's killing. And it's not caring, which is the killing is the opposite of caring. So none of it's true, but it's taking something, making it sound good, and manipulating us.
And when you're having these conversations in your everyday life, I find this very difficult myself because I've only come to the Christian faith over the last few years. And beforehand, I was very much an atheist. A few years ago, if we were sitting here, I would probably be one of those guys who would debate you and laugh at you and say, you believe in some sky daddy and you believe in some guy who rose from the dead.
Yes.
But then if I found myself saying this a few years ago, I would have laughed at myself. But I came to the faith through praying and through having miracles worked in my life and God actually working on me and doubling down on me and doubling down on me. But I also came through evidence-based. And it was actually shocking for me to look into the arguments for apologetics and the philosophical arguments for Christianity and for God and to actually start believing it. And when I'm having these conversations with people, because I very regularly engage people, I try not to get too preachy because I'm not like a theologian like yourself, and I can't articulate the arguments as well as I would like to. But oftentimes when I'm having these arguments, I get stumped with certain questions. And I wanted to pose a few of those questions to you just to get the response. So one of the things that I've had recently is I've spoken to a few females in particular that are very vulnerable to the argument of homosexuality being a sin, right? So I was having a chat with a girl a few weeks ago, and it happened multiple times actually. And she said, I was a Catholic growing up. I grew up in a Catholic church. I used to believe in God, but then I left the faith because I couldn't be a part of something that said that homosexuals are going to hell. Yeah. How do we respond to that?
First and foremost, well done and congratulations on finding Christ. That's wonderful. In terms of, well, there's several angles to this. Firstly, I'll take the sin angle because, again, it comes down to wanting to be nice rather than wanting to be good. And even if people say, no, I don't want to be nice, I want to be good, but then you have to ask the question, based on what? What definition of good? And of course, we would say the scriptural definition, what God has revealed to us as good. And God says that homosexual acts are disordered, and he even goes as far as to say abhorrent. And therefore, we should be guiding, if we love people, if we want people to get into heaven, we want people to live good, holy lives, we should be guiding them away from homosexual acts. And that's a sign of love. But in the modern world, we're told, well, to be loving is to be affirming and to make sure that people's needs are met where they are and everyone's welcome, everyone's included as they are. But the message of Christianity is that we're not good enough as we are. We are unworthy and we're supposed to be better. We're supposed to increase in grace and holiness and strive towards sainthood. And so it's the difference between wanting people to stay as they are and wanting people to be better. But also it's the acknowledgement that sin doesn't mean evil, right? Sin is an act or a thought that separates us from God. It's something that we are all susceptible to. We're all born with that. And I think through our baptisms, we're cleansed of our original sin. However, we still have the capacity to sin and to be tempted and to fall into temptation. And so we have to acknowledge that it's not me saying that you're a bad person or you saying that I'm a bad person. It's acknowledging that we're all sinners and that we all have the capacity to sin and that I want you to help me and I'll help you. Let's all help each other sin less until we sin no more. It's not about pointing fingers and saying, you're an homosexual, you're going to hell. That's not the Christian message. The Christian message is, look, I love you. I don't want you to go to hell. Repent of this act that you're doing. And here's a better way. Here's a good way. Here is Jesus Christ. He is the truth, the way, and the life.
Yeah.
And then to the other part of the question on women in particular. Why is it women that are more susceptible or more vulnerable to this kind of ideology? It's because I think that one of the differences between men and women, and there are differences between men and women, and these days we're told we're all equal, we're all the same. Of course, that's a lie.
Preach.
Yeah. But this is the enemy saying, if you want to be equal to men, you've got to become like men. And then feminism has made women into men, essentially.
Yeah,
and then made
chasing something that they can never attain.
Right. But one of the key differences is that men tend to be, and I'm generalizing because obviously there are exceptions to the rule because that's how humans are. We don't all fit into a category, but generalizing here, men tend to be more pragmatic, more logic-based. We see problems and we look for solutions in a first principles manner. Women tend to be more emotive because they are more emotionally intelligent than men. And so they're more empathetic and sympathetic, and they look for a way to comfort where we'd look for a solution. And so a woman might see this problem of someone being stuck in a homosexual lifestyle and think, how can I comfort that person, make that person feel better? Whereas a man might think, how can I help lead that person towards Christ? It's a different mentality. And this is one of the reasons that women, I believe, one of the reasons that women are not intended to become priests, because they water down the faith, not on purpose, but because they want everyone to feel welcome, included, and diverse as they are. And again, there's a tough love in masculinity, actually. This is why fathers tend to be less nurturing than mothers. It's not because they love their children less, it's just the way that they express that love is different.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you enjoyed that reality-based podcast clip, make sure to subscribe to the reality-based YouTube channel. We'll be uploading many clips and the full podcast. And also, if you prefer the audible version, you can check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts at Reality Based.